My girlfriend made me wait for 2 hours at an expensive restaurant for my own birthday dinner. She finally arrived with another man, kissed him in front of me, and loudly said, "See, told you he'd still be here like a pathetic puppy." I just smiled, stood up, and shook the other man's hand. This morning my phone shows 78 missed calls, and her belongings are in garbage bags. Outside the apartment she just found out the pathetic puppy owns. Last night was my 34th birthday. I spent the first 2 hours of it sitting alone at the most expensive restaurant in the city, watching the waiter's expression shift from polite to pitying. My girlfriend, Isabella, was late. This wasn't new, but 2 hours was a record, even for her. I'd called and texted. No response. I was about to give up and go home when she finally made her grand entrance. She wasn't alone. She walked in holding hands with some guy I'd never seen before. A smug-looking dude with a perfect haircut and an expensive watch. They stopped at my table. Isabella didn't even look at me. She leaned in and gave the guy a long, deliberate kiss, right there in the middle of the crowded restaurant. Then she turned to him, her voice loud enough for everyone around us to hear, and said, "See? Told you he'd still be here like a pathetic puppy." The guy chuckled. The whole restaurant went quiet. I could feel dozens of eyes on me waiting for the explosion, but there was no explosion. Something inside me just went perfectly, wonderfully calm. The hurt and anger were there, but they were miles away, behind a thick wall of glass. I looked at Isabella's triumphant, cruel face, then at the guy who just looked awkward now that the performance was over. I smiled, a genuine, relaxed smile. I stood up, smoothed out my jacket, and extended my hand to him. "Congratulations," I said, my voice even. "You've clearly won the prize." He stared at my hand, confused, but shook it automatically. I dropped a $100 bill on the table to cover the drinks I'd had while waiting, turned to the stunned waiter and said, "Have a great night," and walked out of the restaurant without a single look back. I didn't run, I didn't storm out, I just left. The cool night air felt amazing. It was the first breath of a new, better life. The pathetic puppy had just slipped his leash, and he was about to go home and burn the whole doghouse to the ground. The backstory with Isabella is a classic, I guess. We met 2 years ago, and for the first year, she was perfect. She was fun, she was affectionate, she seemed to admire my work ethic. I'm a private guy when it comes to my finances. I learned a long time ago that flashing money just attracts the wrong kind of attention. I live in a nice penthouse apartment, but the building itself is understated. I drive a reliable but not flashy car. I dress well, but I don't wear designer labels. Isabella knew I did well for myself, but she had no idea of the actual scale. She just assumed I had a good job with a nice salary. I never corrected her. I wanted her to be with me for me, not for what I could provide. Over the past year, though, her true colors started to show. The entitlement began to creep in. She'd complain that my car wasn't a Mercedes, that we weren't going on enough spontaneous trips to Europe. She started treating me less like a partner and more like a service provider. Her job was vague, some kind of social media consulting she did from home, but it never seemed to bring in any actual money. I paid for everything, the food, the vacations, her car payments, her ever-expanding collection of designer clothes. I didn't mind at first. I was in love and I could afford it. But her gratitude was replaced by expectation, and her affection became conditional, usually appearing right before she wanted to buy something expensive. She loved telling people that we lived in her apartment. It was a weird quirk I never bothered to correct. "Oh, you have to come over to my place," she'd say to her friends. She picked out most of the furniture, and I let her. I wanted her to feel at home. I had no idea she was building a narrative in her head that she was the mistress of a domain she had absolutely no claim to. The pathetic puppy comment wasn't just an insult, it was a reflection of how she saw me. Loyal, obedient, and eternally waiting for her, no matter how badly she treated me. She had no idea that the puppy didn't just live in the penthouse, he owned the entire building. I bought the whole apartment block 4 years ago as an investment through a holding company. It was a smart financial move that had paid off handsomely. Isabella knew I had some investments, but she thought it was just stocks and bonds. She never bothered to ask the details. She was more interested in the spending side of money, not the earning side. My landlord, a management company that handled the day-to-day operations of the building, was on my payroll. When I got home from the restaurant, the first thing I did was go into the spare bedroom. It was her closet, really. Racks and racks of clothes, shoes, and handbags that were worth more than my car. I didn't bother with suitcases. I went to the storage closet and got a box of heavy-duty black garbage bags. I started pulling everything off the hangers and stuffing it into the bags. Dresses, coats, jeans, everything. I dumped her shoe racks into more bags. Her makeup, her jewelry box, her laptop, it all went into the bags. I was methodical, efficient, and felt absolutely nothing. It was just a cleanup job. It took me over an hour. When I was done, there were 12 large garbage bags full of her life. I dragged them one by one out of the apartment and left them in the hallway, in front of my door. Then I called a 24-hour locksmith. While I waited for him, I went through the apartment and gathered up anything else that was hers. Photos, little trinkets, books. It all went into a smaller bag, which I placed neatly on top of the others. The locksmith arrived around midnight. He was a tired-looking guy who had probably seen his fair share of domestic drama. He changed the locks on my front door and the service entrance quickly and professionally. I paid him in cash, and he was gone. The apartment was finally, officially, mine again. I poured myself a whiskey and sat on the couch, looking around the now empty space. It was quiet. The phone started ringing almost immediately. It was Isabella. I let it go to voicemail. A few minutes later, a text came through. "Where did you go?" That was not funny. I deleted it without responding. Then another call, this time from the new guy. I didn't recognize the number, but I had a good guess. Ignored. I put my phone on silent, turned on the TV, and enjoyed the peace. The calls and texts kept coming, a frantic digital blizzard I was now immune to. I woke up the next morning feeling better than I had in years. I checked my phone out of curiosity. 78 missed calls, a mix from Isabella, the new guy, whose name I now knew was Julian, thanks to Isabella's screaming voicemails, and a couple of her friends. The voicemails were a wild ride. The first few were angry and confused. Then they turned panicked as she realized I wasn't responding. The last few from the early hours of the morning were a mix of sobbing apologies and furious threats. It was the soundtrack of a narcissist realizing she had lost control. The real show started around 9 in the morning. I was in my home office when I heard a commotion in the hallway through my security camera feed. It was Isabella and Julian, standing in front of my door, staring at the pile of garbage bags. Isabella's face was a mask of pure rage. She started kicking the bags, screaming about her expensive clothes being ruined. Julian just stood there, looking deeply uncomfortable. He was a prop in her drama, and the play was not going according to the script. She started pounding on my door, yelling my name. I let her go on for a few minutes, enjoying the show. Then I opened the door, just a crack. She stopped, surprised. "What is this?" she shrieked, pointing at the bags. "What is wrong with you?" "Those are your belongings," I said calmly. "I figured you'd need them." "You threw my stuff out like trash," she screamed. "And my key doesn't work. You're gonna let me into my apartment right now." I let a small smile play on my lips. "I think you're confused," I said. "This isn't your apartment." The look on her face was priceless. Pure, uncomprehending confusion. "What are you talking about?" "Of course it is. My name is on the lease." "No, it's not," I said. "You've never seen a lease. You've never signed one, and you've certainly never paid a dime of rent." The color started to drain from her face as a horrifying suspicion began to dawn on her. "This is my apartment," I continued, my voice soft but firm. "In fact, it's my building. I own it, all of it. The pathetic puppy you were so amused by last night, he's your landlord. Or, he was. Your tenancy, which was always informal, is now terminated. You have 10 minutes to remove your trash from my hallway before I have security do it for you." She just stared at me, her mouth hanging open. Julian looked like he had seen a ghost. He took a step back as if creating physical distance from the disaster that was unfolding in front of him. Isabella finally found her voice. "You're lying," she whispered. I reached back into the apartment and grabbed a folder from the hall table. I pulled out a copy of the building's deed, with my name and the name of my holding company clearly visible. I held it up for her to see. The silence was beautiful. In that moment, her entire world, A world built on my perceived weakness and her own delusional entitlement crumbled into dust. She wasn't the powerful woman who had her boyfriend wrapped around her finger. She was a freeloader who had just been evicted by the man she had publicly humiliated hours earlier. "You can't do this," she stammered, tears now streaming down her face. "I have nowhere to go." "That sounds like a personal problem," I said. "Perhaps Julian can help you. You seemed very close last night." I looked over at Julian, who was already inching his way toward the elevator. He wanted no part of this. He was here for the fun, not the fallout. 9 minutes, I said, and closed the door, locking the deadbolt. I watched on my security camera as she collapsed into a sobbing heap on top of the garbage bags. Julian hesitated for a moment, then mumbled something and practically ran to the elevator. He was gone. She was alone with her trash. The smear campaign was next, of course. After a couple of hours, she must have collected herself and her things, because the hallway was empty, but my phone started buzzing with texts from mutual friends. "Dude, what happened? Isabella is saying you threw her out for no reason." She had spun a tale of me having a psychotic break, of throwing her out on the street after she tried to gently end things. She conveniently left out the part about her arriving at my birthday dinner with another man and calling me a pathetic puppy. I didn't engage in a war of words. I just sent a single, concise response to a few key people. For my birthday, Isabella brought a man to the restaurant, kissed him in front of me, and announced to the room that I was a pathetic puppy for waiting for her. I ended the relationship. The apartment she was living in, for free, in the building I own, is no longer available to her. End of story. The facts were undeniable. A couple of our friends had even been at the restaurant and witnessed the whole thing. Her narrative collapsed almost immediately. The friends who had texted me with concern quickly texted back with apologies and shock. "I had no idea," one wrote. "She's insane." Then came the financial attacks. The next day, I got a fraud alert from my credit card company. A charge for over $5,000 at a designer handbag store had been declined. It was from the supplementary card Isabella had on my account, a card I had completely forgotten about. I called the company, reported the card as stolen, and canceled it immediately. She had gone from her eviction straight to a revenge shopping spree, assuming her free ride was still operational. The declined transaction must have been another delightful shock for her. Her family got involved a few days later. Her mother, a woman who had always treated me with a kind of polite disdain, called me, screaming. She called me a monster, a cruel, vindictive man who had thrown her innocent daughter out on the street. I let her rant for a few minutes, then I calmly interrupted. "Ma'am, your daughter publicly humiliated me on my birthday with another man. She was living in my property for free, and that privilege has been revoked. If you have any further issues, you can direct them to my lawyer." I gave her my lawyer's name and number and hung up. The final act of desperation came about a week later. I received an email from Julian, the guy from the restaurant. It was a surprisingly sincere apology. He said Isabella had told him that I was a controlling, emotionally abusive ex and that she was terrified to break up with me. She had orchestrated the restaurant scene as a way to publicly free herself. He said that after he saw the truth at the apartment, he realized he had been used as a pawn in her twisted game. He told me she had been calling him non-stop, begging for money and a place to stay. He had blocked her number. He ended the email by saying, "You dodged a bullet, man." I didn't reply, but I appreciated the confirmation. I heard through the grapevine what happened to her next. With no home and no source of income, she had to crawl back to her parents. Her friends, tired of her drama and her constant requests for money, started to distance themselves. She had built her entire identity around a lifestyle she didn't earn and couldn't sustain on her own. Without me, the pathetic puppy, to fund her existence, her glamorous life evaporated. A few months went by. The peace and quiet were incredible. I redecorated the apartment, making it feel like my own again. I focused on my work, went on a trip with some friends, and enjoyed my freedom. One night, my friends and I decided to go for drinks at a bar downtown, a place I hadn't been to in a while. As we were sitting at our table, I looked over and saw her. It was Isabella. She was working as a cocktail waitress. Our eyes met from across the room. The arrogant, triumphant look she had worn at the restaurant was gone, replaced by something I had never seen on her face before. Shame. She looked away quickly and disappeared into the kitchen. I didn't feel a surge of victory. I just felt a quiet sense of closure. She had tried to humiliate me, to make me feel small and pathetic. But in the end, her own actions had brought her exactly where she deserved to be. She had to work for a living, serving people in a place where she once thought she was a queen.